Okay, let's get started. I want to welcome you to the Nightcap Leadership Talk Show. I'll be your host, Victor Vogel, for the next 30 or 40 minutes or so. And our topic this evening is culture. Can a leader impact the culture? Does a leader set the culture uh, for the environment where people are working? Just a couple of rules up front. Again, this isn't the place to go about the business of airing grievances. This is not the format for that. There are other formats, so it'll be better for you to air your grievances on than this one. This is a helpful format to help leaders understand behaviors that employees and followers feel like they need in order to be able to be inspired by the leader and to strive towards excellence. So, second rule is we really don't want to mention any specific names or specific companies. If we keep the personal aspect out of the feedback, it'll normally come back a lot better. We're, after all, what we're really after is what behaviors do leaders need to exhibit to inspire employees, to influence employees to be inspired and follow them in the direction they would like them to go. So that's our topic this evening. If you happen to be out there and you want to join us, this is a talk show. I can take up to four people who would join in with the idea I presented on Twitter throughout the week. And of course, if you are watching, you can watch the program by simply going into that ID 312-819-416, and that will get you in to the program to watch the program. So uh, as we go through the program, it's normally a situation where I would love hourly employees or people who follow leaders to come in and give us some insights about leaders that they have worked for, that they have been inspired by, that, or in fact, leaders who may not have inspired them, where people had to work under some pretty tough conditions and they had to have the job. They were working on the job, but they weren't inspired to be excellent at what they were doing, just getting the job done barely, so to speak, if you can say that. So either way, those specific behaviors, we wouldn't be looking for something like uh, my leader is a nice person, because that doesn't help a leader understand specific behaviors. We might want to describe a particular behavior that's concrete that we see, like the leader comes down and visits the department frequently and talks with us about what's going on and gets our ideas about how to do things. That's a two-way communication thing. That's a concrete behavior that if you sit down with a leader and share that, you can say, this is what turns people on. The lack of that is what turns people off. So that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to get that going, and then we'll talk a little bit about the importance that leaders play in creating the culture that employees have to live with and have to operate within. And there's a lot of things that affect culture, and we're going to talk about those towards the end of the program, where we've got a few minutes. I normally take the last 10 or 15 minutes of the show. It's a 40-minute show, so somewhere between 25 and 30 minutes. We'll talk a little bit about culture and what culture is and culture within an organization. Spent a lot of years changing culture in an organization, and leaders have just about everything to do with creating a culture that can be high performing or difficult to perform in. So That's part of what is here. If you are out there, I hope you would come join me. All you simply need to do is go in to zoom.com and you will, or type Zoom into Google and it'll take you to a link where you can sign in. You will have to sign up in order to get the best benefit out of Zoom, which is a live video sharing concept. You really need that app because you can do so many things with that app within the chat. So uh, I hope you will join me here in just a few minutes and we can talk about what's going on relative to culture and leadership. So many things, until we have somebody come on board and we'll take some time and talk. But I mean, we've seen so much in the news and so much going on with organizations and companies. I would encourage you to jump over to my Facebook page. Let me kind of type that in here in to the chat link so you can go look at what I created was my purpose, or I call it my manifesto. But now that I think about it, it's probably not a good thing to put on Facebooks today. But that's what it is. It's a commitment towards a particular approach to something. So if you look at it in that slide, it's not too bad. But there you go. If you go over to that link right there, you can. And by the way, if you see this, let me go ahead and put this code you would need to enter in to get into the show if you want to. Uh, uh, and this is a show that will get you into the code, or the code that will get you into the show. You can actually come in here live. I can handle up to 4 people. That's what I'm hoping to do, is get employees and followers of leaders to come in here and talk about how leaders behave, because over 35 years of building leaders and developing leadership, I found out that that is probably the best possible source to get information to help leaders to improve. And I think I look back over the years, I've had a fairly high percentage of success. There have been some failures, and there are some people you just can't work with to move into leadership. They go into this believing, and a lot of times, for example, the leader of Uber went in and created a really dynamic corporation that shot up into the billions of dollars because of the idea, the concept, etc. The problem was he wasn't a leader. He's a great entrepreneur, great idea generator, but uh, not a great leader. And because of that, so much of what he put together is beginning to fall apart, and it's falling apart in a pretty big way. So there's a prime example of, just because you shoot up to the top and all of a sudden things are worth billions of dollars doesn't mean that you're an effective leader, and doesn't mean that that can't all come tumbling down if you happen to go the wrong way in your leadership approach to things in terms of setting the culture, the environment that you're working in. So, and it's, if you don't get, the thing is, I found if you don't get your employees involved, if you don't get them engaged as a leader, you miss so many things. Like the Uber group didn't really engage its drivers. They considered them contract. They didn't want anything to do with them. They were really a hands-off scenario with that group of people. They talked about doing this and that, and they'd hold a meeting every now and then, maybe once a year or something. Uh, But the feedback, the input, there was no real touch like we have here. If somebody were online with me here, we could be talking about this face to face and sharing both verbal and nonverbal communication to dialogue about this. Well, with Uber, everything was pretty much set up to focus on emails and the technology, the communication through technology like emails and messaging and all that. It wasn't to some years in when they opened up a few offices to solve problems for those contractors. And the drivers are contractors, they're not really employees. So there wasn't a whole lot of development about how to build a business, how to operate, or any of those things with these guys. And so consequently, it's been pretty much a mess for them the last couple of years in that process. So that's an example how a particular culture driven by a leader can, in fact, have a fairly significant negative impact on a corporation that should be just sailing through it right now, should be sailing through it. Consequently, some people came up behind him and, modified the idea like they always do with good ideas, and like Lyft and a few other programs like that, and took a different managerial tack to it, a different leadership approach to it, and created a different culture, and still have some of the same issues and problems by the nature of the business, but a lot less than Uber did in terms of the ability to get feedback and find out when issues are happening and things like that. So that's what we're trying to get people to do here. We're trying to get you to come online, spend some time with me, trying to discuss the actual behaviors you see in leaders you've worked for. And if you come on board, I can spend some time with you, dialoguing this, pull out of you those behaviors so we can get them identified and get them on record. So leaders can actually look at this show then and come back and go, yeah, that, I can see where if I would do that, it would make work for my people a lot better, and it would energize them and inspire them to do much, much better. Now, that's a win-win scenario, because when a leader does that, employees turn around and end up feeling engaged because they're involved. They get committed to the success of the company because the company becomes a part of them. It's a caring, it's a relationship issue. It's a relationship issue. And you'll see that as we get into defining a little bit about what culture is and how it operates, and how it works out there in the world of organizations. And that organization can be anywhere. If you go to that Facebook page I have posted here, you'll see in that manifesto I wrote that, leadership uh, it is really not, although we see in media the leadership is probably pretty well defined as those people are highly successful or high profile, the president. But leadership really isn't defined in this country by presidencies or CEOs or, top entertainers or major brokers or things like that. The vast majority of leaders are pretty much unknown, and they operate day in and day out in their basic environment without recognition by the mass media. You don't see CBS or NBC or MSNBC or even Fox News for that matter going into the heart of a company and talking to employees, talking about how things are going in America in terms of our ability to get employees and people energized to perform effectively and to compete effectively with the rest of the world. We cannot try to isolate, but I think even our president is seeing it's a little more difficult than he thought in terms of getting commitment from different countries. You just can't go in and bully countries into that trade deficit change. There has to be some dialogue. There has to be some influence about that. So, you can't be the most powerful person in an environment where the rest of the gang in the schoolyard is prepared to. You may be the strongest bully in the schoolyard, but if all of that schoolyard gangs up on you, you no longer have that source of coercive power, as we discussed in our first session, to manipulate or influence people. So the culture is set by the leader. The organization operates under that culture. Employees have to operate under that culture. And it's very important that you get this right, because if you don't, you may have some initial success and you may find out that that disappears very, very quickly. And it can be just a thing like Me Too movement that takes some of the top performers in their industry down overnight. Like overnight, they're no longer broadcasting, they're no longer making movies, they're no longer in Congress. So you can see real quick your leadership has to be premised on something other than money and the title you have and the power you have. And we talked a lot about that in that first session. So if you're out there, this would be a really, really good time for you to jump in here. Give me some insight to what you think about this. We can talk about it on the air. Just make sure you're, when you come on, if you have your camera on, you're going to be live the minute you enter. So make sure you're camera ready when you come in. It's something I try to warn people about before they come on to the show. I'm really, it's a hard, I'm approaching something from a very hard perspective, because I'm not going to the authority experts to ask for the information that leaders need. So where you can call somebody up and say, hey, 2 weeks from now, I'd like you to be on my talk show, you schedule it and all that kind of stuff. This is a situation where I'm asking random employees to come on so we can get a real wide cross section of employees and followers, and they can actually say some of the things that they think need to change in leadership, or that leaders need to do or continue doing to inspire them to be successful and move forward. So that's the importance of this show. It's a different kind of talk show. It's one of those shows where if I can get people to come on here with me, if I can get you just to commit to coming on with me, message me through Twitter. It's at Vic, and here's a Twitter account if you want to message or come join me on Twitter. It's at Vic Leadership. If you go on there, you can message me there. You can message me on my Facebook page there. I'll get back with you and give you all the information you need to come on air with me and help you make sure you're okay with your computer. You can actually do this. I mean, and prepping for this, I'm not a broadcaster, so I'm a leadership consultant, or was for 30 years. So a lot of this I'm having to learn on my own. But one of the things I did I thought was interesting is I actually got on my cell phone and logged into the show myself, and I could broadcast. I could broadcast to myself. So you can literally do this from your cell phone, from your iPad. You can do it from anywhere you are. You can be laying in bed right now with your cell phone. You can hop on for 30 minutes. We can have a great dialogue, and you may learn something you can use tomorrow morning when you go back. If you're a leader or if you're an employee, you can learn how to maybe to begin to develop a relationship with your leader that will help you create a dialogue and interface with your leader a little more effectively. So you can do it on your computer, you can do it from your phone, you can do it from your iPad. You don't necessarily have to be live. You can come on and take the video off and simply do voice, and that's fine too. Some people may feel like they would, get nailed if they're seen on YouTube or Facebook or something where I repost this. You can do that. You don't have to use your name when you sign on. Now I happen to use my name, so I am, not worried about it too much. But some people might, so you may want to create a different kind of like username to use, uh, something that doesn't identify you, and that's fine too. So we can do that. It's something that I think uh, going to be beneficial. It's going to take some time for this to catch on, and I'm not going to get discouraged. If you go read that manifesto on my Facebook page here, I have it pinned to the top of the page, so it's the first thing that pops up. It's probably about a 2 or 3 minute read. You'll understand why I think this, why I've come out of retirement, because I see a total void of good, solid leadership out there in this country. I mean, it's a real void. And it's creating a lot of issues outside of divide. It's creating a lot of other issues in terms of our country as an image in the world. And all those things bother me from the standpoint that my granddaughter, I want my granddaughter to have better opportunities than I did, and her mom and dad do. So, or their mom and dad, my two granddaughters. So, I want this to be something that's like that, but I have to hear from you. So I'm just going to have to be patient. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to do these shows. They'll turn into mini training sessions, uh, but they would be so much more powerful if somebody would just come on and start getting engaged, and then retweet this or send it to your friends or whatever, who could benefit from this kind of information, and then begin to have more and more people engage on a regular basis. We could have a lot of fun helping leaders become more effective at dealing with you and improving your life out there. That's where I went. I went to you guys to find out what leaders needed to do to change. And it was a very, very powerful tool for helping leaders make change. Now, there are surveys you can use to help validate what an employee says, and those are beneficial too. And I have some of those. And, at some show, I will cover the ones I've used that I felt are very valid and reliable. Uh, in the future, that help me identify cultures and across the organization. So uh, that's part of what's there. But don't know that we're going to get anybody on here this evening either. But that's okay. Like I said, I'm not giving up. I'm going to keep pitching this because I believe it's a different approach. It's going to a different base to find out what leaders need to do. So maybe we can make a significant change and begin to improve leadership in this country. But let's talk a little bit about culture, and for the next 10 minutes or so, so that I can get this information in. So you take away something from the rebroadcast that maybe you can use. So I'm going to share my screen here with you for just a second. And we're going to talk about culture. And culture really is something that engages and becomes powerful because of the values that people have. And so I want to kind of discuss the component parts of a culture. And in doing that, I think what we can begin to see is what kinds of specific behaviors to look for You'll be able to recognize these. That can help you in an interview for a job, or it can help you in dialoguing with your supervisor about how to make changes that will improve your relationship. So it all really begins with values, and values are beliefs that are important to a person. You know, they help guide their lives, and they're really the most important variable in a culture. You know, as opposed to people having a lot of different beliefs or attitudes about things, a person usually has very few values in comparison. Okay, because these are the things that they take to heart, and they tend to drive their decisions in their lives with. And let me give you some examples of what would be considered core values. These are very personal, not easily changed values: love, um, hate, bigotry, grace, God, morals. Okay. And now, where do people tend to evolve values from the time you're born to the time you're older until the time you die? Some of these can change. I'm not saying they can't change, but the older you become, the more ingrained they become in you. At least they tend to be that way for most people. And you begin to and the reason that is because you see what works and what doesn't work as a value in your life. So these tend to come from your parents, people that are close to you that you have some sense of respect for. They tend to come from your parents, your pastors, maybe, teachers that you get excited about and you feel, you know, energize you. And then role models, people you look at out there who you see are doing things the way you would like to see them done. And they tend to reinforce some of those core values. Okay. So you have some of these values, and from those values, you tend to develop a set of beliefs. Well, let me go back here. There we go. You start to develop a set of beliefs. Now, beliefs, to put it simply, are perceptions as something exists or is true. So you will see things from these core values that you have. You'll see certain things evolve in your life based on your what happens to you over time. And for example, a belief system might be a belief in heaven and hell. Okay, it might be marriage and what constitutes a marriage. However you view it, it's still a belief pattern. Racism, or the lack of racism, is a belief system. It's a belief pattern, and even the scientific theory is a belief system. So you can see how your values might impact some of these things. These normally belief systems tend to evolve out of experiences you have, teachings that you receive, social norms that you're experiencing, and even worldviews that are impactful in your life. They mean something. So they cause something to happen that is either good or bad in your life. So value systems or values tend to evolve into belief systems as you're exposed to the more outside world. You know, the values, the core values tend to be things that you personally believe, and you don't necessarily have to alter those based on what's going on outside of you. But when these turn into belief systems, you begin to ask questions about why things are happening. Okay, so I don't want to go too much deeper than that. Now, the belief systems then in turn can lead to attitudes, and attitudes really end up being the positive or negative feelings that you have towards people's or ideas or things out there. Okay. And here's some attitudes: tolerance, forgiveness, excellence, success. Now, a bunch of people have a bunch of different beliefs about those that create different attitudes for each of those things I just mentioned. So, what happens is these attitudes become evolved around your belief systems, uh, and they begin to evolve and develop because you're beginning to interact more with different people, different scenarios, different situations like relationships and laws and rules and guidelines and ethics. And we talked a little about those in the leadership talk show number 2 about ethics and morals and those kinds of things. So attitudes are, you begin to develop positive and negative feelings about your how things are going, premised on your belief systems, that your values reinforced. And now you have these attitudes evolving off of this. Now, let me see if I can put this to you in a more concrete, clear way, okay? Uh, let's see if we can move this over in here, and I'll try to move this along a little bit faster. Uh, these values I talked about are core values. If you think about this circle, we call it a centrifugal circle. The further you go, the closer you are in the center, the more personal everything is, and the more difficult it is to change because you embrace those and you don't want to give them up. The further you get out to these circles, the more you're influenced by others, situations, other people, other scenarios, other belief systems, etc., from different points of view. So, core values are very dear and they're hard to change. So, you can imagine that these are kinds of things as a leader you want to know about some of the people you manage. You want to know about their belief systems and you want to know about their attitudes, and but between their attitudes they'll develop certain expectations out of these belief systems. In other words, once they develop a particular belief system, like racism, then they'll have certain expectations about that belief system that they expect others to behave by. And that's where they will judge the positive or negative premised on those attitudes that they have, or will react attitude wise to others based on their expectations of people that are reinforced by their belief systems. And then once all this happens, you begin to see the actual behaviors, the concrete, observable behaviors. For racism, it could be marching in the street with Nazi signs, and and or the resistant group reacting to those. Those would all be observable behaviors around core values of bigotry, creating belief systems of racism, with expectations that certain people are going to behave certain ways relative to those beliefs, and because of that you're going to have a positive or negative attitude against them, and consequently you will then uh, act a certain way towards them. You'll have overt specific behaviors. Now that's a real radical um, uh, approach to use to a topic area, but usually those tend to make for easier explanation. So now, so you can see if a leader has certain set of core values about a position, they have certain belief systems about how a leader should operate, they create expectations about that, which creates attitudes that they judge other people by, and consequently they behave certain ways. So that's why, this is exactly why leaders are so critical. They're so critical in establishing uh, that behavior. So hopefully you'll see how this works. Um, we are uh, focused too much on just one specific, for example, one specific belief system and set of expectations is around finances. Success gets drawn in and it tends to be measured in terms of dollars and cents as opposed to other kinds of things like helping people improve their work role, providing good quality jobs for people, helping them to change and adapt to a technology changing world. Those are things that a leader has the ability to change and improve that will help inspire employees to perform a lot more effectively and to want to stay with an organization, want to create a relationship with a leader that will take them in the direction of excelling in their position, consequently causing the company to excel. So, yes, leaders have everything to do with the culture, and it all has to do with the values they're coming from and the belief systems they've set up out of those values. And because they are in a position of authority, and we'll see this in the upcoming programs on communication and trust building and that kind of stuff we're going to be doing. When you have that kind of authority and power, it makes it extremely difficult for employees to open up that dialogue about how they feel about certain because they may be coming at it from a different attitude, a different belief system. In fact, if you take one person who spends 10 years in a company, there is a strong probability that person at the end of the tenure of 10 years is not going to be the same person that they were when they started in the company. Okay, so many things will be happening to them, so many evolutions will begin to gnaw away at their belief systems, their expectations, their attitudes, and consequently their behavior. And as a leader, a good leader will understand that. They will get to know their people. They won't isolate from their people. When you isolate from your people, you cannot find out this information about them. They cannot find out the information about you they need to relate to you and deliver what you want. You become unpredictable, okay? And predictability is critical. And someone trusting you enough to follow you down the path that you want them to go. So, yes, leadership is critical in building cultures and organizations and creating the right environment for a successful organization. And more importantly, sustaining an environment over a long period of time as opposed to a short period of time and then starting something else. So, okay, we didn't have anybody join us again this period, but I sure hope you watch this and I hope you pass it on to someone else because I will be posting the IDs necessary to get in and get live on here and talk about these things with me so you can learn and grow as an employee. So until then, I hope you find a way to effectively engage yourself into a relationship with your leader if you're an employee or if you're a follower of a leader. You are important. You are the essence of what is happening now. There are changes going on in technology. Instead of being isolated and fearful and separating for your leadership, you need to unite with your leadership and find ways for them to help you sustain a security and a confidence that you will have a job later on. Okay, I've enjoyed talking with myself. I've enjoyed presenting information to you. I realize this takes time for people to grasp this concept and get on, but I really believe people will when the time comes and they look at some of these programs. So if you get a chance next week, let me go back in here and kind of give you a real quick overview of what we're going to be going into in terms of the program. This is the base that's so critical now for employment. And so we're going to be covering roles, communication, conflict management, leadership development, branding your leadership, leadership strategy, and finally defining what leadership success looks like. So there you go. You have a great day. I will talk to you the next time we're on the show. Pass this around. Pass this around to your friends. Have a great day.